Ladies and gentlemen, this is another episode of No Sky Podcast, where we talk about mental health in the Black community from our perspective and our culture. Now, on the second episode, we have Mr. Jonathan M Lassiter. He is a Black clinical psychologist, professor, public speaker, great in all things that he want to do. He also is a part of the LGBTQ community. And we know on No Sky Podcast, we don't discriminate, man, because everybody has an opinion, especially this brother right here. He is educated. He's ready to go. And Mr. Lassiter, man, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. And you can just, we don't have to have any pretense. You just call me Jonathan, but I'm good.
That's cool, John.
Yeah. Only my students have to call me Dr. Lassiter.
Got you. Respect. So let's just kick this off real quick, man. Yeah. So what got you into being a psychologist, man? Especially, among African Americans, man, that's a really touchy, career to walk down, man, because historically, man, Black folks, we don't really like talking to psychologists, man. So tell me about how you really got into that.
Yeah, I always say that I became a psychologist because I was trying to figure myself and my family out.
Okay.
I grew up in a household with great parents, but human beings like we all are, right? So what that means is that they had no handbook and they were raising us based off of what they knew. And given the opportunities that my parents had, sometimes that was a good thing, sometimes that was a bad thing. And for a child like me, who grew up as a bookworm, not wanting to go outside, a little bit different from other boys, and also with a chronic illness, I have sickle cell anemia. There were times where, my parents, particularly my dad, didn't really know how to deal with me in a way that I thought was the most nurturing of what I wanted from him at the time. And then my peers also didn't know how to respond to me, given how different I was. And I didn't know what was going on because it was like, okay, it's something wrong with me. And so I became very much introverted and introspective at a very young age. And then as I got older, I learned about this thing called mental health and psychology and went down that path.
Okay. Now, for those who are listening, if you never heard my story, now I'm currently 38, or I'll be 39 September 2nd. My story started 1994, October 31st. I was admitted to a psychiatric hospital at the age of 12. I was diagnosed as being emotionally disturbed, and I spent nearly 3 months in this hospital. Following my release from this hospital, I was put in a special education program for 6 years. And going through that and seeing what I saw at 12 years old, and being in a psychiatric hospital and seeing kids who really cut themselves, seeing kids who were really bipolar, who was really clinically depressed, left a mark on my life for my entire life. This is the reason why I started this platform, is because I actually lived it and I went through it. Now, I didn't major in, psychology or mental health or anything like that, but just going through those type of situations, it gave me a heart to want to give back and to help people realize they can overcome those circumstances and those situations. I don't know how many people know this who are listening, but, among African Americans, and especially Black males, the prison rate of most Black males were in special education. Now, I don't know the exact percentage, but best believe majority of them were in the special education program. And at some point, they all had IEPs in school, and they all was on some type of medication. Me, myself, I was on Prozac, Ritalin, Zoloft, all these different medications. And it really didn't help me. It just made me not want to just be myself and be human, because them medicines are very, very strong. Excuse me, they're very, very strong. So it's like at 12 years old, I'm a regular kid, had a real bad temper. And that was the reason why I went to go see a psychologist. And I never forget that day. It was like you see in the movies, they showing you these cards and what do you see and how do you see it and how do you feel? Are you suicidal? Are you homicidal? And unfortunately, a lot of things that was said was elaborated, and this is coming from a a PhD doctor. So my mom, you know, being a single parent growing up like most of us grew up in the hood on Section 8, on food stamps, you know, she not really knowing what to do. She went along with what he said, you know, but unfortunately that left a mark on my life. You being a psychologist and you being a clinical psychologist at that, you have the education and the know-how and the knowledge behind what's really going on. From your perspective, I would say in the past 5 years, with all this police brutality going on and, you know, unfortunately the passing of DMX, you know, and his substance abuse issues, is mental health among Black culture, was that a taboo subject, I would say, prior to 5 years ago? If so, why or why not?
Yeah, and I appreciate that question. I really appreciate you sharing your story on this platform, and you know, because we really need to get the information out about mental health in Black communities. And related to, I'm going to answer the question you just asked me, but it's related to what you were saying before. And when I hear you talk about your experience, and I think about my own experience, you know, a lot of times what's happening is that the traditional mental health system, which is, let's just be honest, is a white system, right?
Absolutely. Definitely.
It's medicating, right? It's medicating and treating. I put treating in quotes because it's not real treatment, but they're treating normal behavior that they don't understand, right? If you think about, like in your case, like you said, you had a lot of challenges around socioeconomics, so on and so forth. And you were just expressing yourself. But if you don't understand, if you're not culturally attuned and you're not aligned with a particular community, particular culture, and you don't understand it, it can look like disease to you. And that's what happens so too often, actually, when we are being treated by people not of our communities. And so then they see something, they see a young Black boy running around and they say, oh, he has ADHD. Oh, he has conduct disorder. He broke some rules in school. Well, are the rules just? Right? And so too often we are being treated and medicated by people who don't understand us, who don't understand our culture, and then we are being misdiagnosed, mislabeled, and misappropriately, or I should say inappropriately, treated and institutionalized. You know, so I want to highlight that what you have shared is a systemic problem. It's a systemic problem. And related to the question you just asked me now, that is why there is so much mental health stigma. Because I guarantee you, well, they say, you know, you can't guarantee anything 100%. But what I will say, is that I am confident that there would not be as much stigma if we had more people that look like us. Currently, only 2% of psychologists like myself, which people who, you know, go to graduate school, have PhDs, are Black. Only 2%. If we had more psychologists who are Black, who were in our communities, who we could point to and say, that person came from where I came from, or they have a similar background to where I come from, the stigma would not be as much as it is. So it's all connected. And personally, I think some of it is intentional. If we look at the history of psychology and mental health, there have been so many cases of ethical violations when it comes to treating Black people. I mean, we look at the whole use of intelligence tests particularly designed and used to sort of quantify and prove, again, I'm putting all these things in quotes because it's rubbish, but to quantify and prove the intellectual inferiority of Black, and for that matter, Latinx folks compared to white children. So all of this stuff has historical roots that go back a very long way. And so sometimes I hear people say, why don't Black people want to see a therapist? And I said, that's a valid question, but we also have to ask the question, what has this system, what has the profession done to perpetuate the distrust, which is justified, and what does it need to be doing to remedy that? And one of those things is by making it more enticing to have more people like myself go and get those, get those degrees, to have people like you, what you're doing is to amplify those voices, to amplify the issues in the community. So the more that we're all doing our part, I think the mental health stigma will decrease, but it's very real and it has historical roots.
Definitely, you touched on the historical part of it. Definitely, because in my situation, I admit I had a bad temper, and I probably said some things that was probably at a 12-year-old, and I grew up, and I say this all the time. I grew up in the church, hard in the church.
So did I.
You know what I'm saying?
So did I.
Yeah. So you know about the fasting and all. So growing up in the church, it was something happened. Hey, we're gonna pray for you. And now on the flip side of that, if there are a lot of brothers and sisters that grew up in the church who did face some challenges, the downside of that is, okay, well, we don't want to take them to a psychologist because we know 99.9% of the time it's going to be somebody that's Caucasian. So they're not going to understand my child because they don't come from where we come from. So I don't want them misleading my child, or putting them, in my case, in a psychiatric hospital and further along damaging them. So we're just gonna let the preacher pray for them. We're gonna slap some of that holy oil. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna have a come to Jesus moment and they're gonna be okay. But in retrospect, it wasn't okay, because there were people who really had issues who wasn't able to express themselves because of that reason. But I tell people all the time, and to kind of have the back of Black people before our time, like our grandmothers and stuff like that, you got to remember, if you was a Black man or a Black woman, you had a good job. Say you work at the Ford plant back in the 60s when it was flourishing. And say if you had some depression going on, right? You don't want to go see no psychologist, because if it gets back to your boss, that you see in a psychologist, and you already Black, so that's already 10 strikes. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Now it's like, it's either
it could be used against you.
Exactly. Either deal with this, and deal with what comes with it, or go see this doctor and have a chance of losing your good job, your benefits, and the whole 9 yards. But now on the other side, like you were saying, when you are and you're not diagnosed the right way, or you don't have the issues, like I put my transcript on my Instagram page to let people see what they actually said about me. They said I was suicidal and homicidal at 12 years old. You know what I'm saying? Think about it. From visiting the first time I ever went to go see a doctor. We was in there for like 2 hours, and out of this 2-hour conversation, you really believe that I'm suicidal and homicidal? I just got a bad temper. I might have said some things, you know what I'm saying, that probably like, man, you shouldn't say that. But Matthew, I'm not 12 years old. I wasn't killing nobody. I definitely wasn't suicidal. You know what I'm saying?
That goes back to that cultural incompetence that I'm talking about. The person that you saw was culturally incompetent.
Yeah, Dr. Wendell Powell. Enough, he was an old white dude, man. He had to be probably in his 80s.
Point blank and period. He was culturally incompetent. He had no business assessing you, diagnosing you, institutionalizing you. If people wanted to go open up the file, we might be able to make a charge of ethical violation, but I wasn't there, so I'm not going to.
Yeah, true.
But clearly, though, again, this goes back to the importance of having mental health awareness in our community and having more of us in the mental health workforce. Because again, you're 12 years old. I mean, even if we take race out of it right now, 12-year-old boys, typical 12-year-old boys, are rambunctious. Right. So and then given all the things that you mentioned about your environment, right? Like it is not appropriate. And it is, when we think about suicidality, who among us have not felt like you know what? Right? Life is
Yeah,
hard.
like, it's over.
Life is hard, right? Life is hard.
Yeah, especially when it
That
comes to
does not
relationships.
mean, that does not mean let's institutionalize you per se. Now, listen, there are times where institutionalization is appropriate, right? But based on what you're telling me, and again, I wasn't there, but based on what you're telling me, I'm pretty confident in saying there was just some cultural incompetence going on.
And I'm gonna tell you what's crazy. John.
Mm-hmm.
Is when I was released
Mm-hmm.
from that hospital, that's when the problems really started.
Yeah.
That's when my temper was elevated and I became extremely aggressive because of what I saw when I was in there.
Yeah.
You know, now it was only like me and like 2 other Black kids among about 20 other white kids in our group. About, I don't remember none being over 13 to 18. And then I didn't really see the adults that much because we were in pods, we was in units. And you gotta imagine, I'm 12 years old, I have bars on my window. I'm being told when to go to sleep, when to get up, what to eat. You know, I have a roommate who I met who's now doing 4 life sentences plus 40 years. You know, and when I look at that brother and I look back, you know, like, man, he never left that mentality or what he was going through when he left that hospital, because what he was charged for. And I'm like, man, that's crazy, because when I was in there with people who really was bipolar, who really was schizophrenic, who really had multiple personality disorder. You know, and I ain't gonna lie to you, I'm really hard on the Black community when it comes to the whole bipolar thing, because I'm like this. Are you clinically bipolar? Like, have you really went to go see a psychologist? Have you really gone through the road? Or you're just basing it off of what other people say? Because we get into this position where it's like, oh, they're telling me I'm bipolar because I'm depressed on Monday, but I'm happy on Tuesday, depressed again on Wednesday. Have you been on medication? Have you been institutionalized? You know what I'm saying? So we as Black people, we have to start getting away from things that we really don't. Is it bipolar, or you just made bad choices in life?
But you know, you know? This goes to the point you brought up about the church, right? And so so 2 things here. One, you talk about the problem started after you left, right? Because it was a traumatic experience, and that experience would be traumatic for anyone, being taken away from your primary caregiver, in your case your mom, and then put in this place where you don't know anyone, people don't necessarily have your best intention in heart, and you are seeing people with actual severe difficulties.
Yeah.
That's traumatizing for anyone. Okay. Number 2, though, go back to your point about the church and Black people and bipolar, right? There's a large need. There's a big need for mental health awareness, for mental health education. Because you're right, we don't know. People, when I was coming up, I'm sure the same as you, you're like, you know, a year and some change older than me. So we in the same generation, right?
Oh yeah,
so,
definitely.
But when we were coming up, you know, people said bipolar all the time. And it was just like, no, what you meant was mood swing. but it's something different. But we don't know. How would we know?
Yeah.
How would we know? You know?
Yeah.
So what we need is education. What we need is education. And again, though, that's not all our fault. I don't want to completely take away responsibility from Black communities. We have a lot of work to do. And at the same time, we have not have access, and a lot of the resources that are out there are not culturally appropriate. They don't have people on those resources that look like us. They're not speaking our language. They're not in the grocery stores we go in.
Yeah.
You know, so all of these things are a factor. And so I'm the type of person that I'm always taking a both and perspective. I'm looking at the system, and I'm also looking at the work that we as Black people have to do. Because the entirety of our existence since 1619, has been about resistance and resilience. It has been about us cultivating health and ways of surviving and thriving when there was no other resources for us. So that's still a part of our reality. As much progress as we have made in 2021, the buck stops with us. We still have to do it. If we don't do it, no one else will do it. And that does not negate the failures of the system. So both of those things exist. You asked me about my journey, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to become a professor. So I went to school, I went to college, then I went to graduate school. I was in graduate school for 6 years. Then I did a 2-year what's called postdoctoral training, where I got additional training for 2 years, and then I started my first job as a full-time tenure track professor, and I'm in my 5th year now. But one of the reasons why I wanted to become a professor was because that inspiration. I wanted Black people to be able to see someone that looked like them doing this work. I wanted Black students in particular in college, in graduate school, to say, oh, there's someone, it may only be one, and oftentimes I am the only one that looks like me in my job, right? But there's one, and he did it, so maybe I could do it. Oh, I'm interested. I'll never forget. I'm gonna tell you a story. I never forget my first job. It's 2016, fall of 2016, so around September. And my first day in my office at my new job, I'm so excited. I'm a professor now.
Oh,
I'm
no
so
doubt.
excited.
Yeah. You got to own that. You got to wear that
Yeah,
hat. Definitely.
yeah. And I'm setting up my books in my office, and a young Black man comes by my office, 19, 20 years old. And he's a little shy. He's outside my office. He knocks on the door. And he says, Dr. Lassiter? And I say, yes, may I help you? And he says, oh, he introduced himself. He says, I heard that you were new on faculty here. And I said, yeah, this is, I said, actually, it's my first day. You first student I meet. And he said, I just want to stop by and meet you. And, being a Black man who went to predominantly white institutions for my own education, I know what it's like to be a student, to want to see another Black face, and especially a Black face that's a professor. So there was a look in his eye that I immediately connected with, and that look said, finally, someone like me, someone that might get me, And he starts to tell me his story. Young Black man from South side of Philly, grew up in a tumultuous household. And he was saying, I said, so tell me, what do you want to do? I said, tell me your major. He was an English major at the time, but he switched over to psychology, I like to say. But he was an English major at the time. I said, what do you want to do? He said, I want to help Black kids. And he said, I want to write about Black men in love. And it just put a smile on my face, because I was like, here is a young Black man being so vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable, with another Black man that he don't really know, but he's taking a chance because of who I am in this space. And how often do we get to hear Black men openly profess that they're interested in love and exploring love and what that looks like, and not just in the sexual sense, but in this real connection, emotionally vulnerable sense? And I was just so grateful to have it. It really is a privilege to be in that space, in that position, to be there for that young man, that young Black man at that time. And so the work that I continue to do as a professor, more than anything, it's about being a representative. It's about, so someone can point and say, this person is doing something that I can do. They may not want to do exactly the same thing I want to do. They may not want to work with exactly the same populations I work with, and that's fine. But to know that someone's done it and is doing it, and that they can do it, that's part of the work that I do. That's part of my mission. That's part of the most fulfilling part of what I do. Because as I said, this field is only 2% Black. And it can be isolating. It can be a lonely place. It can feel like you're fighting battles at every turn because people don't get it. You're fighting an uphill battle. But when I think about those students, when I think about my clients that said, I specifically wanted to come to you because you were a Black man or because you were a Black same gender loving man. I wanted to come to you specifically because of that. Then I know that all of the BS I got to put up with from those white folks and those folks that may not be white, but believe that white is right, it makes it worth it. It makes it worth it. And so that keeps me going on this journey of mine.
And I think, and not to interrupt you, but and let me clarify so everybody, all listeners to know, we not No Sky Podcast. We not beating up on other races or anything like that. It's just that we're talking about where we come from, and because this is the reality of what happens when you are oppressed, not just systematically, but from every angle, education-wise, all these things play a part in our genetic makeup. And as far as Black folks, it doesn't matter where you come from any place in the country. When you're Black, you relate to other Black in some way, shape, form, or fashion for the most part. Like you were saying, how the young man knocked on your door. When he knocked on your door and he saw you, he knew it was because you're Black and he's Black, you're going to connect in some way, whether it's going to be through music, whether it's going to be through sports, entertainment, because we dominate. Just keep it 100. We dominate all of this. You know what I'm saying? You can have a conversation regardless. And you being part of the LGBT community, and when you first hit me up on Instagram and wanted to be a guest, or inquired, should I say, about being a guest, I jumped on it. Because what brings togetherness and what brings diversity is two people coming from two different backgrounds, but yet having the same understanding of a particular subject in regards to sexual preference, whatever. That doesn't matter, because mental health doesn't just affect whether you straight, not, whatever you are. It affects everybody. It doesn't have a name tag, or you're going to be depressed if you're this way, or if you're going to be a bipolar if you're that way, or you're going to have anxiety disorder. No, this is, and that's why I want people to understand that this podcast platform is for everybody in our culture to come and express themselves, especially from an educational standpoint of what's going on in the Black community when it comes to mental health. And you taking the time out to come on the podcast, and inquiring about it, I respect that, because it is hard to get people to come on your show to talk about mental health, because once again, it's such a taboo. Like I said, within the past 5 years, I would say Black people together have spoken up more about mental health, of taking it more serious, because of the things that we see and things that affect us and how we grew up. Now people are becoming more open, like, I suffer from depression from time to time, or I suffer from anxiety disorder or bipolar disorder. But, growing up, being Black, those things was taboo. You just didn't talk about those things, because it was already, once again, systematically oppressed against us. To just every day was a struggle for the most of us. You know what I mean? So if you had some issues, whatever, we always resorted back to our religious beliefs. But, fortunately, we're just now starting to come to that point where it's like, okay, and me personally, growing up in the Christian household, I always believe that God gave us common sense. Regardless of what you believe, you know when you're born not to do certain things or not to think certain things. So when you know you start having these issues, you know it ain't normal. You should go look and reach out for help, before it gets to a point where it's like medicine ain't going to help this person, or even maybe even a doctor, they're so far gone until their own it's become untouchable, unreachable for most of us. But I got a question, a question I want to know, kind of a personal question.
Yeah, sure.
What made you hit me up? Because I'm telling you, when I tell people, and there's those listening, it is hard to get people to come on my podcast. What actually made you jump on my, and say, hey, I'm interested? Because, I have like 540 quotes on my IG. Mm-hmm. And just let everybody know, I wrote every single one of those quotes. That's what I do. I'm a writer. Matter of fact, y'all see the book, Quotes and Realism. Yeah, I'm a published author myself. But
congratulations. Yeah.
Appreciate that, man. It's a struggle with that though. But what made you say, hey, what about my, I don't know, whatever that you saw on my page drew you to wanting to be a guest?
Yeah, that's an interesting story because it all happened very quickly. I just, but I tweet a lot. I'm not as big on Instagram. I'm trying to get better on Instagram, but I tweet a lot, and I often tweet up under the hashtag Black Mental Health. And so I just did a search, and I was just like, I wonder who else is tweeting, what's going on in the Black mental health. And I believe your post or someone posting about your post was up under the hashtag of Black mental health. And it was like looking for people to discuss mental health for a podcast. And I said, oh, well, let me look at this. What is this? And I saw, what you were trying to do. And again, because I am such a firm believer that representation matters, I said, I want to do this. I'm very fortunate that I get asked to speak at a lot of places, big and small. But for me, again, going back to that representation, I want to always be sure, no matter where I find myself, that I'm able to and making the time to speak directly to my people. Because that's what it's about for me. At the end of the day, that's what it's about for me. I am invested in Black liberation. And I say that unapologetically, right?
No doubt.
And for me, Black liberation starts here.
Definitely mental. Definitely.
Right? Which is why I became a psychologist. One of the reasons, right? Became a psychologist. It starts here. And so I wanted, the short answer is I hit you up because I wanted to be able to speak directly to the folks and to another Black man that's doing it. Because as you said, mental health we're starting to talk about it more in the Black community, but Black men, still aren't talking about it as much as Black women. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity to do that. So I appreciate you,
hey, John, man, I appreciate you more, man, because like I said, man, I had actress Cherry Johnson on my very first episode. And, you're familiar with Family Matters. She played Maxine, whatever. And, when she agreed to do it, we was going back and forth for a minute, but it didn't take her long. She wasn't resistant. She was like, all right, cool. When I had her on the show or whatever, and she really got in depth with the things that she was dealing with and family and so on and so forth, I want people to know, yes, I love to have celebrities on my show as well. Definitely people who are open to talk about, mental health or whatever, but just the everyday people, what I mean? Because by you coming on the show and representing, you know what I'm saying? That gives me a confidence like, yo, keep going, Matt. Keep pushing, because there are people who's watching. There are people who are interested. Don't give up, because it get discouraging sometimes. And, I care more about quality than I do quantity. You got some people podcasts, they may have interviewed 200 people, and that's cool and all, but 200 ain't got nothing on 10 if it's 10 solid, 10 real, genuine, not just trying to get in front of the camera. I'm talking about genuine, solid brothers like yourself. You know what I'm saying? So definitely, man, respect to you. We about to come wrap this up. Let me ask you a question. Where can people find you at on IG or Twitter. And also, if they are looking for mental health services, do you know of places that they can go to ask for help if needed?
Yeah. So there is, first I'll answer that last question first. There's always therapy for Black girls. There's therapy for Black men, and there's also therapy for Black children. So I encourage you to, hit up, and all of these have Instagram pages. So
Okay.
encourage you to hit them up, follow their little link trees, and you can find directories.
Gotcha.
There's also the other, there's one other that I don't want to get the name wrong. So what I'll do, but it's specifically for LGBT, trans, and non-binary people of color. It's a therapist network. So for Black folks that may be along the intersections of sexual orientation, who may identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or questioning, there are resources specifically for them. And I'll send you all of this in email, and you can put this up in the podcast notes.
Definitely.
And as far as where you can find me on Twitter at Matt JL, MATJL. And on Instagram, you can find me at JM Lassiter, LASSITER PhD. So that's where you can find me at. Also, you can also just Google me. I have a website and all my information is up there. So I'm easily Googleable. So yeah, feel free to do that. And if you are a citizen of New York State, I'm currently accepting clients. So I'm happy to, have a free consultation, to see if, you could be appropriate for services with me if you're looking for a Black therapist, a Black same gender loving male therapist, whatever you're looking for. I'm also available that way.
All right. Well, hey, this has been another episode of the No Sky Podcast, where we discuss mental health amongst the Black community, our culture. Let's give it up for the brother, Mr. Jonathan M Lassiter, who came up here and did his thing. We so much greatly appreciate you, brother, for coming up here, expressing your knowledge, your wisdom. Also, for those who are listening, you can follow me on Instagram at gift, GIFT _ Gab 1982. Again, that's gift, GIFT _ Gab 1982. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Def Poet, DFPOET, and also definitely on Facebook at Matthew Griffin. Until the next episode, y'all be blessed. And remember, if you ain't got mental health, you ain't got no help. God bless y'all. We out. Peace.